Hello, and welcome back to Things Are Going Great For Me, a podcast about the arts and the entertainment business. My name is Claude Deering. I'm an actor and a comedian. If you're listening today, it's likely you heard my interview with movie star Chris Pine and screenwriter Gio Parsons. If you're new here, make yourself at home. Relax, because I want you all to enjoy yourselves. Pour yourself a cup of tea, chamomile, oolong, maybe some mint tea. Hey, go nuts. Get out the ice cream. I promise it pairs well with this show. On each episode of this series, you'll hear from huge movie stars, big TV stars, and even some bright, shining Broadway stars, as well as second guest interviews with exciting up-and-coming comics and actors and established producers, authors, and writers. We banked all the episodes, which also makes the series a time capsule of events that occurred throughout an historic summer. You can follow me, your host, at Claude Deering on both Twitter and Instagram, and you can follow our show handles on Twitter and Instagram at Things Are Going Great For Me. Look, I get it. We know a lot of podcasts ask you to rate and subscribe. It's a pain in the ass to remember to do even one more thing in your day. But here's the thing. We're doing this as a limited series until you demand more. So if you like any of what you hear today, do us a big kindness. Subscribe to the show. Leave us a nice comment. Give us those 5 stars wherever you're getting your podcast from today. Hey, Apple Podcast peeps. We see you, Spotify folks. Hey now, Stitcher fam. What's up, you freaky Pocket Casts cats? We love you all equally, and we hope you love what you hear, and we want to keep bringing you new episodes of this show. And by the way, we're thrilled to be sponsored for this limited series by Icelandic Glacial, the purest tasting water on Earth, sourced from the legendary Ölfus Spring in Iceland, naturally filtered through ancient lava rock, and certified carbon neutral for both product and operation. You are what you drink. Be a force of nature. Icelandic Glacial, natural spring water sourced from Iceland. Available on Amazon, IcelandicGlacial.com, and a retailer near you. Today's guest is Clarke Peters, star of Da 5 Bloods, Harriet, 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, HBO's Treme, and of course, he played the iconic Lester Freeman on HBO's The Wire. He's one of the best actors and artists alive. I'll be speaking with him in a few minutes. And a little bit later, you'll also get my conversation with Della Saba. She's an Actors Gang company member. If you're not familiar with the Actors Gang, it's the Los Angeles theater company started by a group of actors, including Tim Robbins. Former company members include Helen Hunt, John C. Reilly, Kate Walsh, Jack Black, and Kyle Gass. Della also plays the voice of young Judy Hopps in the animated film Zootopia. She has an exciting voiceover career that also includes roles in Ralph Breaks the Internet, Family Guy, and Guardians of the Galaxy. Della and I have a few things in common, including some shared heritage. It's also a lovely conversation about the art of acting and actor training at the renowned Stella Adler Studios, where we're both alums. Stick around, you're not going to want to miss it. Joining me again today is my co-host, Winston Carter. Winston, where can people find you online?
Yeah, I'm online at, Winstonius on Twitter and Instagram. You can listen to my other podcast, Try It, You'll Like It, wherever you find podcasts. Yeah, I'm on the internets.
Great. So our interview with Clarke Peters has taken on added meaning because, of course, on Friday there was the terrible news of the passing of movie star and icon Chadwick Boseman. He died after a 4-year battle with colon cancer. His death stunned the world. Clarke Peters worked with Chadwick on the recently released Spike Lee film, Da 5 Bloods, a movie about 4 African-American vets battling the forces of man and nature when they returned to Vietnam, seeking the remains of their fallen squad leader, played by Boseman, and the gold fortune he helped them hide. Winston, how are you doing with this news about Chadwick Boseman?
It's rough. For our listeners who don't know, I'm Black, so I feel like I need to give that context.
Yeah.
Really upsetting. It's always hard whenever, celebrities, we don't know them. Like I don't have a personal interaction with this person, but I do have relationship with the roles they've played and what those roles mean.
Yeah.
And especially so young and seemingly out of nowhere, I think is the thing that's really catching everyone by surprise here.
Yeah, it was very shocking. He was, there was a viral moment, or there was a moment that went viral a little while ago. It feels like maybe it was a year ago, where he appeared very thin in some videos and people were concerned.
Yeah. I very much respect the ability for someone to keep this personal, especially someone as famous as him. And I'm honestly really inspired. If you think about it, I mean, that means he was filming Black Panther and knew.
I mean, Yeah.
Think about like how grueling that is on fucking anybody.
Yeah.
Like, that's truly incredible. I mean, to
Yeah.
make one movie is that you're the lead of is like running like 10 marathons. And to do that while dealing with a particularly shitty form of cancer, it's just inspiring. Like, it's really, I mean, I'm not the person who gets choked up at like these types of things, and I in general don't have them affect me very deeply, but there's there's like two that have ever really affected me this way. So young, very obviously super talented.
Yeah.
And just straight up out of nowhere, and in the middle of like a million other crises,
Everything else that's going on.
Yeah. Like, I mean, like, it's weird that that's what we're talking about. The NBA didn't play playoff games this week. Like,
Yeah.
crazy fucking things are happening in the world, and for good reason. Like it's good that the NBA was like, no, we're not doing this.
Yeah.
Like, that's a good thing, but it's just like how many things at once.
I know. We're seeing many folks posting articles and tributes, including talking about their kids' love of Black Panther. This is yet another uncomfortable conversation for parents to be having with their kids during a tumultuous year.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. Like, I'm. There's a bunch of reasons why I'm happy I don't have kids right now, and this is certainly one of them. Where I'm like, oh, I can't even imagine. I cannot imagine. Ugh.
Yeah, yeah, it's a weird conversation to have. You know, my oldest Henry loves that movie, and I just don't know what exactly to say or when to say it about that about him. I'm just not sure yet. I'm still kind of processing.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, you know, there's I'm trying to think of how to say this and not sound so pretentious. Movies and entertainment, we get it. Like, it doesn't, we all know, like, okay, it's not, you know, frontline doctors. It's not, you know, FBI agents out there stopping human trafficking. But it is inspiring and super important. And it does have a direct effect on how people see themselves and how they see the world. And few people in recent memory have had like such a run of roles that did that. But yeah, it's impactful. It really does, like the stories we tell and the stories that we are told have a long lasting effect on us. Yeah.
His most iconic role was, of course, King T'Challa, the Black Panther. What was another one of your favorite Chadwick Boseman roles?
I mean, him playing Jackie Robinson in 42 is pretty unbelievable. Him playing James Brown is like it's one of those things where you don't even, like, you know, someone has a defined iconic presence, but you don't even grasp it until you see someone else do it. And then you're like, whoa, okay. I knew this person like had a distinctive voice, had a distinctive way of carrying themselves, but like, then you see it and you're like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Wow. Like, it's really defined. It's kind of this is like a bad example, but it reminds me of the first time I saw someone do a good Harrison Ford, and you're like, oh yeah, holy shit. Like, but then to see someone be able to do that level, that caliber of work, through an entire film is like unbelievable.
Yeah. I mean, I think like partly with Chadwick Boseman was that, like, throughout these various characters that he played, he with an incredible range, and he covered a lot of ground in his young career. There is, you know, there's something about himself that is, and people have commented on this, that there's a soulfulness in his that sort of emanates from his eyes. There is something that he brings to these characters that goes beyond an imitation or an impression of these iconic people that he's played, but that is unique in terms of his ability to storytell.
No, I agree. Yeah, he was just very, very talented, and I think, you know, it's really hard, I think, to grasp. So, like, you know, I'm Black, I'm mixed race, and so I have like kind of dealing with that, my own elements of that, right, of my involvement in the Black community, like, and my family and all that stuff. But one of like it's so significant. Like, you know, he's part of it's, how am I saying this? It's really hard to put just how goddamn big of an impact Black Panther had. Like, of all the roles he played, of all these incredible real people, it's hard to really state how important Black Panther is.
Yeah.
And I still don't think we've seen not only did it make a tremendous amount of money for a Black-led movie that's mostly Black people, that's mostly set in Africa, that's unbelievable, right?
Yeah.
But then the cultural impact it had and still does on so many people I know, it sucks. It just sucks. I mean, if you like see people who are really upset by this, it's because, you know, the Black community had Superman for 3 years and then he died. Like, that's what happened, and it's very difficult. And I'm putting this is my take on it, which is still someone on the periphery of that community. You know, I can't really capture necessarily the wholeness of how important of that movie and his role in its importance, but yeah, and it's tragic. It's really unfortunate. I've really taken personally, I've been focusing on the idea that, like, look at how much, like, I've acted in some very low budget movies and it was exhausting, and I wasn't even doing like a great job. And he fucking did amazing work for four full years. Well, that's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable.
Like, that's really, really crazy. And like, that's worth like note. Like, holy shit! Like, you watch Endgame, that dude has cancer, and he's doing the shit he's doing in fucking Endgame. Like, that's unreal.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just like, it's so tragic and so shocking and came out of nowhere. But it should also be genuinely inspiring, because that's like, wow. You know, like, most people can't do that on their best day.
Mm-mm. Now, it's important to note that, you know, my interview with Clarke Peters is from back in June of this year, and the cast was in the middle of their press week for Da 5 Bloods. It was less than 2 weeks after the brutal murder by a police officer of George Floyd. So we didn't hardly at all talk about Chadwick Boseman's role as Stormin' Norman in the film. Since the movie has come out, I've seen it. I thought it was one of Chadwick's best performances. I wonder if Chadwick Boseman would win a posthumous Oscar for his role as Stormin' Norman.
Wouldn't bet against that, right?
I don't know. Yeah, I think it would be incredibly poignant if he did.
I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't know. It's a weird. It seems like what I would say is, it seems like too small of a tribute. Does that make sense?
Oh, to win an Oscar would be to win, like, it would probably be Best Supporting Actor. So, but you're saying to win an Oscar is sort of not doesn't really sort of,
his impact is bigger than that. Is kind of.
Oh, of course. No, I agree. Like, yeah.
Which is really, I think, really kind of saying something. Like, the other example we have for something similar to this, right, is Heath Ledger, right?
Yeah.
And he won his Oscar, and, you know, it was obviously very well deserved and great. But I'm like, if I really think of like cultural impact, like, those two things are not the same. They're not even on the same level, which is
no
kind of amazing that, like, this actor comes out, doesn't do a tremendous amount of work, but the work he does is like fucking important, you know?
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it really is. And very, very sad. Okay, folks, you've been very patient with us.
Sorry for putting you through this, audience. No. Thank you for coming back.
No, I mean,
and then to be confronted with a very sad bit of talk, but it is what it is.
It is what it is. Yeah. Rest in power to Chadwick Boseman.
Uh-huh.
And without further ado, here now is a father figure that we could all use, Mr. Clarke Peters. Now, there has been, in the midst of this health crisis, we've had these horrific recent murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery here in the United States. There has been I saw somebody writing about the fact that because we are all home already, that this has been a moment in time where people can show up, demonstrate, and march. And we're seeing that not only here in the United States, we are seeing it in Britain. It's going on as we speak in Britain.
Yes.
With statues coming down today, I saw in, I believe, in Bristol. And Of course, John Boyega gave an incredibly impassioned speech in Hyde Park, calling out the names of these 3 recent American victims of police violence, and also Sandra Bland and an Englishman, Mark Duggan, the victim of a race-based criminal murder by the UK police in 2011. There had always seemed to be a prevalent and potentially poisonous theory that racism doesn't exist in the UK the way that it does in the States. Do you have a take on that?
Yeah, I've got a take on it. Yes, it exists here. You know, it's just cloaked in a different methodology. You know, the racism all across the board, right, has got to be seen as something that is attached to capitalism. All right. Prior to people being black and white in America, they were African, they were Cherokee, they were Narragansett, they were French, they were Dutch, they were German, they were English, you know. But when those people of color began to play the Europeans against each other, seeing that they were at each other's throats, that's when the notion of, wait a minute, you know, these people are a common enemy against our capitalistic plans. You know, so it was easy to divide and conquer in that respect. And I dare say that's going. You know, it's still here. It's still across the board. It's the same thing that's happening in Europe now. You know, and I say on a level in Europe that is not being that has not been well publicized. You know, when African unions decide that they don't want to pay the bills any longer that they have paid for over 50 years, 5 times over, and they say, wait a minute, we're going to use our money to bolster our economies and make sure that our countries are not dependent on your charity. Europe is getting very upset about that, you know? And so you do have notions of Brexit. You do have the Gilets jaunes and the French not understanding why France is upping the prices of their oils and their rates and everything, because they're no longer getting that money from the countries, from the colonies, or extorting it, I must say, from those countries, you know?
Yeah.
So it's the racism is on many levels. You know, the racism is on many levels. And it's the same there as it is here. What is different is that there it manifests itself in overt violence. Here it's sort of quiet and insidious, you know, and it's cloaked in the language. It's really cloaked in the language. This is their language, you know. So unless you are well versed in English, not American,
right?
English, then you won't know what's happening around you.
Right. Yeah. The British they do seem to speak in code in a way all their own. The Brits.
Yes, absolutely. And it goes over most Americans' heads as well. You know, as far as like, you know, the demonstrations today, you know, and you know, and it coming on the back of the pandemic, I think it's interesting and curious that is happening like that. And of course, people want to get out, having been locked up. So part of their getting out is the frustration of being locked up in the first place, right? Secondly, George Floyd is not the martyr. He's the man who the world has seen as an example of police brutality on all Black people. And so it must be understood that that is first and foremost of what his function is in all of this. It is not that, oh, George was a nice guy and he got murdered. No, that is not the case. It is that yet again this has happened, and yet again like this, in such a nonchalant way. For that man to be standing on his neck with his hands in his pocket. You know,
brutal.
But at the same, it's brutal. Yes, and historically brutal. And that's
Yeah.
why you have like the Maoris coming on out doing the haka,
Yeah.
because that's what the British did to them. And they
Right.
recognize that and they
Right.
remember that, you know?
Yeah. Now you've had a, sorry to interrupt. I was going to say you have had your own history of demonstrating. Is that correct? And protesting. Is it true that you were arrested during a protest during the Vietnam War years?
In the very same way that those peaceful people were attacked by the police in order for the 45th man in the White House to take a photo op, is the same way that it happened to us in 2000, I think 2001, somewhere around there, right? And I was registered as a first aid. I wasn't meant to be participating in the demonstration. You know, my brief as part of the students who came on down from Boston to participate in the demonstration against Vietnam was to look after everybody. You know, I had a big Red Cross on my back. I had a first aid kit with me. I had a gas mask just in case anything went down. You know, and our brief was to, number one, follow what the police say. Number two, take care of anybody who was injured, whether it was an officer or whether it was a protester. And on the particular day that we were shanghaied, you know, was a day when John Mitchell came out and asked everyone to clear this area, and said you have 20 minutes to do so. In 3 minutes, we were following his directions, and 10 minutes later, we were arrested.
Yeah, a bait and switch almost.
You know, just
yeah.
So you can understand my distrust of this whole system, and at such a young age, and trying to do the right thing. You know, you got to go a long way to convince me that all of this is just, that all of this is right. You know, and even the demonstrations, sometimes I wonder about them. You know. It can be used. It can be manipulated. The way that the media will look at it. You know, can serve or can damage. You know, the idea.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that there's been lots of conversation about the sort of the combination of the protest and the demonstrations, and then following up with the vote in order to sort of move the conversation. And of course, there's always going to be that struggle with the other side of what they call an argument about whether what you're saying, sort of the purposes of the demonstrations and the way in which they are carried out. I wanted to ask you a little bit about theater, which is very important to you and important to me and many. And to talk a little bit more again about the way that the pandemic is going to affect theater. And I was curious what your thoughts were about the immediate future for theater. I saw in Germany they're removing seats in venues and spacing the seats apart. I saw that Claire Foy and Matt Smith are going to do a reading of a production called Lungs, which I think they had done at the Old Vic or the Young Vic. They're going to do it again. They're going to stage it and then stream it with no audience in front of them. Do you think that this is going to forever change theater? Do you think that theater needed to be changed anyway? Is this an opportunity?
I don't think that theater needed to be changed. I think that the theater prices for tickets needed to be changed.
Yes, completely agree with that.
Yeah, I think that in doing so, that the hierarchical structure that is set up, that has now been imposed on theater, needs to change. You know, so that someone who has never been on a stage, but is an A-lister in Hollywood, for example, is now going to be leading a company of actors who have worked their lives to get where they've arrived, and are still being paid less just because this face comes onto the stage, you know. So I think that needs to change, you know. Overall, I don't think theater will ever change because theater has been here since people gathered together to tell stories, you know. So in that respect, it will never change, you know. In the immediate future, I am concerned. You know, I am concerned. There's no doubt about it. You know, what is happening to the theaters. But I think that the domino effect of it all will affect the economy. You know, and those tickets will either rise up or everything will come down proportionally. You know,
right? Do you think it's in part the real estate of London or New York City that, you know, maybe theater needs to move outside of these places?
You know, I've written a wonderful little story where a group of actors hijack a theater because the producers are raising the price of tickets in order to hold on to the real estate.
Right.
Simply for that reason, you know. And they realize that it's not these producers, but the producers are just frontmen for a conglomerate who are trying to buy up all of the real estate in wherever this place is. You know, so yeah, the real estate does have an impact on it, and that can be manipulated as well. You know. I remember when Cameron McIntosh was asked he went to a meeting somewhere in Europe because they were going to build this town. And in this town, they wanted a theater. And near the town was an airport, you know, and I think he went there to have a meeting with the town to bring one of his shows there because it was so popular that people would fly in and bring revenue to this town. You know, that's when I thought, my God, is that where theater's gotten to? You know, but yes, it has. Yeah.
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 I wanted to. Do you think that this is what the Konstantin Stanislavski with that and Chekhov, what they were doing? Is this what this was all about? Was this just a revolution against rich people?
Yes. Yes. Well, you know, I go back to what I was saying at the top of our conversation. You know, with the racism. Yes, it's about economy. It's totally about economy. You know, for some producers here to fire all of their casts, to fire them, not to give them any compensation whatsoever, to even carry them through for 1 month, not even to offer that, but to put the burden of that on the taxpayer. That's an economical statement.
Yes,
that's a statement of economy. You know, so yeah, I think that that all of those Eastern European writers were spot on with that. With the class struggle, and weren't they right?
Yeah, indeed. So now you and I, so we have a mutual friend in your brother Dave, who's a good friend of my dad's. I do want to thank Dave for passing along this interview request. I have to thank my dad as well for suggesting that I reach out, and of course, thank you for doing this. You know, there is a funny story about the last time I saw Dave in person. Did he tell you what happened?
No.
I passed out in front of him. He didn't tell you?
What caused you to pass out?
All right. Well, this is a strange. This is about 5 years ago, I think. My wife and I went to London and we were with my dad there, and we went to see Dave play a show in, I think, Kilburn, and it was at the sort of the tail end of Carnival week. Carnival. So we're watching Dave play. Winston might have been there as well. And my dad pointed out a guy in the pub who looked like the Artful Dodger if he was about 60 years old. Big stovetop hat and a long morning coat and a big gnarly cane and about 1,000 rings on his fingers. And my dad said, "That's the weed dealer for Kilburn." I thought to myself. And I took an opportunity to go outside and have a cigarette. I was smoking, I guess, at the time.
Stop right there. I went outside. You went strictly from the weed dealer to going outside and having a cigarette. Okay, I'm just putting this and that.
If you're getting the picture. So he would, but this is a little while later. So I went outside maybe a few minutes later, 20 minutes later or so, and he was outside, this guy, and he was rolling a spliff, or he was about to spark up a spliff. So I went over to the guy, because I'm an idiot, and I said, and I'll just talk to anybody. And I said, "Hey," I said, "is that what I think it is?" And he went, "Where are you from?" And I said, "I'm from Los Angeles, where that shit is legal." And he went, "All right." And he passed it over to me. And I took a drag on it. I said, "Cheers." And then my dad came out of the pub. My wife came out of the pub. Dave came out of the pub. And we're all talking, in the four of us standing and talking. And this, whatever, I smoked. I think it was what they call a Jeffrey. This thing started to percolate up into my, I could feel it rising up into the top of my head, and they're going on and on. And they were talking about, at one point they talked about you were, Dave, I think was talking, you were going to do something with Dominic West in Edinburgh, and it became a little overwhelming. And I essentially passed out and woke up. I was on the ground. All to say that I was on the ground in a cold sweat. My glasses had fallen off of were somewhere else on the bricks, and I didn't know what had happened. And I just remember my dad saying, "Claude, you just humped that sandwich board and fell over." That's the last time I saw Dave. We've spoken since a few times, but I learned a good lesson that time.
Wow.
Now, you have changed your name because, of course, Dave's last name is Clarke. You made Clarke your first name, and you made your first name Peter your last name, Peters, correct?
Yes. Yep.
And okay, so let me ask you a question out of Shakespeare. What's in a name, Mr. Peters?
What's in a name? A job. A job is in the name. It's interesting because I've often churned over this a number of times. The reason I had to change my name around was because there were too many Peter Clarks in the union. Yeah. But there was an actor named Brock Peters who was a wonderful actor. So I didn't mind the Peters putting an S at the end of that. And Clarke, is the Clarke. But also, when I look at, when you say what's in a name, the name Clarke is is part of a Scottish clan of which my grandfather was the bastard son of in Barbados.
Interesting.
Okay. But a Clarke is the one who writes, is a clerk or a clerk or a cleric, right? So I figure, well, I sometimes I do document what's happening on in life, like a Clarke. Peters from Petra, which is the stone. I'd like to put those things in stone. So I think that Clarke Peters is the one that puts your history in stone so that you'll always remember where it is.
Oh my!
That's what's in the name.
My good heavens, that was just outstanding. How fabulous!
You did ask.
That was a silly question and a great answer. I wanted to go on to ask you: do you think that having a name like that is, or having changed your name, do you think the name change is helpful for someone who's interested in turning into other people for a living?
I don't know if it's helpful, but I can tell you sometimes it's disconcerting. But I guess I've heard people say here, yes, that's a good name, to have the name Clarke, because they go to Clark Gable and, Clark Kent and all that kind of stuff. So being in this culture, yes, it has served me well. When I changed it around, I just didn't want to lose my identity totally.
Okay.
You know? And on the form, the first name, your family name was first, and that's really where it came from. Clarke Peters, put the S on it. You know, that's really where it came from for equity. But I do think that yes, I think that some names work well for some actors, very much so.
And I guess I'm asking also that I think this idea that, you know, they say this about actors, that or this difference between being an actor and being a comic, a stand-up, which is that actors want to be anybody but themselves, and a comic only wants to be themselves. Does that resonate?
That's interesting. I've never heard that before, you know. But then I've always wanted to be a comic too.
Me too. I've wanted to do both, yeah, and have done. So let me see here. So I was curious about your training. Did you do one of these big grad school programs? Did you do the NYU, the Yale, the Juilliard, or did you?
No. I was accepted to Juilliard, to go to Juilliard in the spring of 70.
What was that audition like? Do you remember?
Well, it was actually through a woman named Anna Sokolow, and I was doing a dance class, and a dance movement class with her. And in that class, there was David Ogden Stiers.
Oh yeah, from MASH.
Yes, and he was pretty much instrumental in getting me an interview with somebody over at Juilliard. I was to come on back for an audition in that fall, but that was the summer that I was arrested. And I came, and it was too late for me to come into the Spectrum or the school in that September. So it would have been the following term, coming in midterm, like February or March or something like that.
So you had been protesting, and then that arrest happened. Did you then take an opportunity to go to London to escape what was going on in the United States?
No,
to Paris, I think.
I took an opportunity to go visit my brother.
Yes.
You know, and in visiting my brother, I wound up getting a job backstage at Hair.
Right.
And one day he didn't show up, and I went on his place, and that was the beginning of my working on stage in front of an audience, a mature audience. And so by the time it was time for me to come on back here and go to school, I was already working.
Right.
My next job was I left there and I went to, where did I go? Yes, I went and did Hair in Denmark. I started touring with that. So if you're an actor and you want to work and you want to do that, you know, and you're young and stupid like I was, you know, you take the opportunity as it came, and that's exactly what I did.
Now, go ahead.
My training was through workshops and through different mentors throughout my career. You know, I'm still training.
Aren't we all? Yeah. Now, a lot of people around my age know your work from The Wire, created by David Simon. In 2016, Rolling Stone named it the second best TV show of all time after The Sopranos. The Wire showed us a picture of the crack cocaine epidemic in Baltimore, the problems of the war on drugs, and corruptions at all levels of city life. Would you describe it differently?
Yes. I would say, first of all, it was the first show. It wasn't the second best. It was the first. Right?
Yeah.
And the reason why I say that is because The Sopranos can only survive in America, where The Wire can survive anywhere in the world, because everywhere in the world has the problems that we showed in The Wire.
Okay, I understand. Yeah. Now
that's why it's number one, and that really that isn't really me saying that. That's just from the responses of people that I've run into from Spain, France, Italy, Germany, Scandinavia, and Scotland, London. You know, so They don't talk about the Sopranos, or if they do, you know, they always come around to The Wire being something that's far more important in their lives, and that's what the media should be used for.
Interesting. Yeah. So that I see. It translates.
Yeah.
better. It's also significant for introducing audiences to a number of actors who are working now a lot. In addition to you, there was Idris Elba, a very young Michael B. Jordan, Dominic West, Wendell Pierce, Amy Ryan, Michael K. Williams, amongst others. You, of course, played Lester Freeman. With Lester, we warm up to him over the first few episodes. He develops a little bit, almost it reminded me a little of Michael in Godfather. He's sort of stoic almost. Was that intentional on the part of the writers, or did they eventually say, hey, this guy is great, we got to write more for him?
I think that that's what they had in mind the whole time. You know, I'll tell you honestly, I every time a script showed up, you know, because of the nature of Baltimore, I was not surprised. I would not have been surprised to see a line that went from Hurt to Carver, going, "Oh man, did you hear what happened to Lester? You know, damn, whoever thought he would cop it like that? You know, because life is so precarious there. I never thought it would go on. I was surprised I survived the whole run. You know, but I think that that's what they had in mind all the time. You know, I wasn't party to that.
Now, he was, this character, Lester, had been in the pawn shop or the pawn unit for 13 years after being kicked out of Homicide for doing what he said was police work, in quotes. Jimmy McNulty refers to him as, quote, natural police. What does that phrase, natural police, mean to you?
Natural police are the police who really do protect and serve, with no other agenda except to protect you and to serve you. And in the case of Lester, who was based on a man named Stephen Clarke, actually, he followed the money in order to try to find out where the drugs were coming from. And he followed it all the way to the seat of government in the state of Maryland. You know, and then he was asked to back down, and which is what he did. You know, so that's real police. That's real police. You know, you don't see. It's not until like I think the last season that you see Lester become real police when he decides, you know, oh, to hell with it. You know, we're going to do this. We're going to do this way.
Yeah.
You know? But his methodology of detection, you know, is as well real police. Just connect the dots. You know, listen to what's being said and connect the dots. You know, that's how he finds a string of. That's how he finds Barksdale. You know, that's how he begins to put together everything that they wind up finding of oh, what's his name with the clock. Oh yeah, the next bad guy.
Oh yeah, it's escaping me too.
Yeah.
Now Lester tells McNulty at one point, he says in the early on, when they ask you where you want to go, don't say anything. What message about the police do you think the show is making with a comment like that?
I think that the message is that the institution is in control. The institution is in control, and they will do anything they can to make sure you stay in line, which is why the institution, all the way through all of these murders, you know, all these police have gotten off or not served, right? Because that's their promise back to those policemen as well. Whether the policemen rape a woman, or whether they kill a black man or kill a First Nations person, you know, whether they have an accident in a car, you know, that's what that refers to, you know. So it's basically shut up and go along with the program.
I want to talk to you a little bit about your prop work on that show. The model building that Lester is doing. He's making tiny furniture. Was that about Lester, if he couldn't control his environment, he could control this little world that he was creating?
No.
All right, I'm sorry, I whiffed on that. I thought that I felt really
No
smart
way.
when I came up with that.
No, it was actually twofold. I thought that it was part of a backstory that you didn't get, which was that Lester was a widower.
Oh, wow.
Right. And when I heard that he was a widower and still looking after two boys, I fabricated that the furniture was his way to stay in connection with her, that was actually her hobby. In order to keep her alive in his life, that's what he did, right? But Ed Burns tells me that it's because when you're doing detective work and when you're studying to be a detective, what the institution does is set up little miniature crime scenes, right? And they set them up for the students to come in and take a look at a crime scene and try to decipher what went on. So in his mind, it was a carryover from that.
Okay, got it. That's another great choice. It was curious to me because there is a sort of a mirroring in the other David Simon series, Treme. We see the character Big Chief that you played is creating this quite elaborate headdress over the course of a number of episodes, and so there's a bit of a mirroring there. And I wondered about this idea that, again, something that Lester says in The Wire, that we're putting something together from scratch. Mm-hmm. And I wondered if that was in the writing or if that was an actor, something that you had brought to each or both of these roles, and whether that's a bigger philosophy about life, perhaps a life in the arts, you're building something from scratch.
Well, what it was for me, for Clarke, the actor, because they began to, in the second season, there were no instructions as to what to do with the furniture. It was almost non-existent, So I kept bringing it back on in as part of his character. But it also served me. What I realized in the first season was that when I'm concentrating on building those, my attention is on everything else around me, so that if the camera is on a person, you can be seen to be telling a story because you're listening, and you can't just sit there listening idly. So
it's a bit of a Meisner,
yes, precisely
technique,
precisely
the
Meisner,
activity,
precisely, yes. And the same thing with Big Chief. Now that was part of the culture, But I think that in the execution of telling the story, the more that I was involved with some Meisner-esque properties, the silence, I was able to make the silence speak more than words, and that's what David used.
Now, I'm not as well versed in Treme, but I do recall Big Chief's son is a great jazz trumpet player, and yet there is this question about whether the son has the New Orleans soul in him as he heads off to make a name for himself in New York City. This resolves itself later when it turns out, in fact, he does, or he had the New Orleans soul in him the whole time. So here's another bizarre theory question for you. Is Treme a Wizard of Oz story? It starts in the aftermath of a hurricane, Hurricane Katrina. Wizard of Oz starts during a tornado. The major theme of Wizard of Oz is there's no place like home. Big Chief's son returns home from the Oz that is New York City.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. But no. No.
See, no, not at all. Okay, got it. No red slippers anywhere.
No red slippers anywhere, and you can't click your heels 3 times to get back, and not any of that. No,
that's my English double major coming into play there. I need to find other readings and things.
No, it was much simpler than that, actually. Any writer is going to find, has got to root their story on people who they know or people on real people, The chief and his son are actually Donald Harrison, the sax player, and his father, right? Donald Harrison Sr. was a big chief. And if you see a picture of him, he probably is Native American Indian. The reason why the son's story is actually Donald's story, who had stepped out from New Orleans and to go to pursue a jazz career, a music career. When he and Terence Blanchard were kids, you know Terence Blanchard?
I don't.
Take a look, look up that name, Terence Blanchard.
I will.
Terence Blanchard and Donald Harrison were the young John Coltrane and Miles Davis, right? Both out of New Orleans, Terence went out in the world, and really because of Donald's roots, it doesn't make him any less of a musician or internationally known. His roots still are in New Orleans, and you can still catch him there, and always coming on back. Now, a brief history on the Indians there. It's the chapter that America has always left out of the books, and that is that the whites didn't just push the Indians away. You'll notice that in American history, you never talk about slavery and the Indians in the same chapter when it's dealing with the Europeans. They always separate that, when in actual fact, there was a strong bond between the enslaved African, the freed African, and the runaway African, and the Native American Indians.
That's interesting, right? Because it's come into the nomenclature now, this new term, BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, People of Color.
Yes. Well, I have right here a book that I was looking at. I can probably show you it. I don't know if this is coming up forward or backwards. Can you see this?
Yes, we can find this and we can share this with our audience. Yes, Travels in the Interior of North America. Yeah, a beautiful book.
I draw your attention to the picture on the front of it, right? That's a watercolor of the Indians that this German prince saw at the time of his coming to America. That is the color of their skin. It is not the color of the skin that you see of the Lakota people in North Dakota, nor the Hollywood Indians that you've seen many, many times. When you read or hear about the writings of Christopher Columbus, writing back to Queen Isabella, saying what he found copper-colored people. He didn't find tan people. He didn't find pink people. He found copper-colored people, right? The reason why this prince decided to have this, make this book, was because they were being wiped out, and he knew that they would be extinct in a very short space of time. So he took a colorist with him to America to document and record these people as they were in their natural habitat, with their headdress as well as their skin tones. All right. So that nomenclature of what was it? The Black, Indigenous, People of Color. Yes. Well, yes, very much so. And we're trying to pull this notion back, because people actually believe what they read in their history books. And why shouldn't they? Because the professors who've told them have as well been indoctrinated with the same lies, so it's no wonder that this thing is perpetuated, that down through time. But, the truth will out.
So now to get into a little bit about your theater history, you've been nominated 3 times for the Olivier Award in London for your work on Unforgettable, Porgy and Bess, and Chicago. You also wrote the musical review Five Guys Named Mo, which landed you a Tony nomination for Best Book of a Musical.
Mm-hmm.
You've starred in multiple productions on Broadway, including playing Gloucester in King Lear and Shakespeare in the Park with John Lithgow and Annette Bening. It seems you always want to be where the art to commerce ratio is always heavier art. Is that correct?
Well, that works for me. I also think, like with Five Guys, what I realized is that you could create a piece of theater for the least amount of investment for the greatest return. So I'm not ignorant to the economy that surrounds a piece, but I don't want to be seduced away, and have to be chasing the money because of whatever. That does not mean that I don't want to be paid well for what I do. I do, and I've never been paid, anywhere near what my white counterpart gets paid for the very same job and done 10 times worse.
Yeah.
But that's by the by for now. But I like the craft of storytelling. I love it. I love it to death. And for most actors, for most actors that enjoy acting and storytelling, there's nothing like it. That's the reward. The reward is being able to have the power to manipulate an audience, to bring them to tears, to make them laugh, to inform them, and do that responsibly. There's nothing that tops that. Nothing.
And it seems that you've stayed away a bit from Los Angeles. Apparently, you had been asked during the filming of The Wire in 2002 that you were told to go to L.A. and you are quoted as saying L.A. is full of dimwits. Do you think that, is that still, do you believe that to be true about L.A. today? Or do you think that L.A. today is beginning to change a little bit? I completely agree with you sometimes. But I've seen some changes in my time out here. I'm also wondering if I did this whole thing wrong and I should have just stayed in New York and, just sort of in the scrum until I could get my theater career going.
Yes. Yeah. It's an industry. It's a machine.
Yeah.
And it just puts out it just puts out what it can put out. And it has a certain quota that it's got to meet. There's certain amount of money that's got to be lost, in order to keep the books balanced, and in doing so, there's a lot of crap that comes around. I went out there with the intention of staying there for 3 months, until I got a gig, so I can understand it. And after 3 weeks, I thought, this is full of shit.
What year was this? Do you remember?
It might have been the last year of The Wire, or the year after The Wire finished. Somewhere around there. But the scripts I was getting, I just...
Yeah, I remember that time. Yeah.
I wouldn't want, I wouldn't want my children watching half the stuff that came to me, and has it changed? I don't know, because I ain't been back.
I think there's some really interesting stuff going on now, but I think it has taken us a while to change the culture out here. And I don't, not that it's changed, but I think that it's moving in a few interesting directions. Now, you've been in some Oscar-winning and Oscar-nominated films, and I guess I would say Oscar-winning when I talk about Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, because it won the two lead actors' Oscars. That was written by Martin McDonagh, a playwright, also the writer of In Bruges, which is an excellent movie.
Yes.
Phenomenal film. You were also in Harriet with Cynthia Erivo, who was nominated for 2 Oscars for that film. There was so much I didn't know about Harriet Tubman.
Yeah. There's still a lot more to know.
Yeah, she freed almost every member of her family. She was, one of the few women in the U.S. to lead an armed expedition, that she wielded a gun so expertly. She chose to bite a bullet instead of getting anesthesia when she had to have her skull fixed and lifted. Go ahead. You were going to say, I'm so sorry.
Well, she was a phenomenal woman. Suffragettes were part of her scene as well. That she lived so long to tell those stories is just just wonderful, that there's a generation who were able to hear her voice, but there was, there's it's that whole aspect of American history that is documented in little pamphlets that are yellowing and that are falling apart, that people have to go to piece together the history of the indigenous people and the enslaved Africans to tell the American story, and I hold that if people had heard of Harriet Tubman before now, if they had heard of Harriet Tubman, if Harriet Tubman's story had been part of the historical curriculum, from the 30s, we would have a different America. If you knew about Frederick Douglass before then, if you knew about the Native American Indians who were congressmen before that, during Reconstruction, we would have a different America. That's the ideal that we're trying to get to. That's the ideal that someone along the line could see the potential of, that has been undermined and thwarted ever since, simply because you have a populace that is uninformed as to who they are. If they understand who they are, they will realize how they can arrive at this land of the free and the brave.
That's right. And she is supposed to be gracing our $20 bills as of this year.
And do you think that's going to happen?
No, the Treasury Secretary, Steve Mnuchin, punted on that and decided to delay it indefinitely, which is an absolute shame. Absolute shame.
Yes. So, how much power do people have?
Maybe we'll find out, I hope.
It's
we'll see come November.
Yeah. It's disheartening. Yes, I hope something changes in November. I really do.
Now, up next, you're in Spike Lee's *Da 5 Bloods*, starring yourself, Delroy Lindo, Isaiah Whitlock Jr., another Wire alum, and Chadwick Boseman, amongst others. The story tagline is 4 veterans returning to Vietnam in search of the remains of their fallen squad leader and the promise of buried gold. These heroes battle forces of humanity and nature while being confronted by the lasting ravages of the immorality of the Vietnam War. Now, we spoke a little bit about your history of protest during those Vietnam years. One of the posters for *Da 5 Bloods* features a fist in a uniform with the tag, "Our fight is not in Vietnam." Was that in part what you were protesting those years ago? And you're nodding to say to agree. The film also features footage of the famous Kent State protests, the Nixon's resignation. Could the release of this movie be better timed than the current situation that we're in?
There's an entity called God that has a way of influences the changes on the earth. And if we're lucky enough or perceptive enough, we will see that hand writing things and putting things in place for a particular end. And I think that this couldn't have come sooner. This couldn't have been orchestrated or written or created by anyone else. This is a worldwide event. The protests are worldwide. Netflix on the 12th is releasing this worldwide.
June 12th, ladies and gentlemen. Well, this will air after that, but I'm sure people will see it. I'm sure everyone will see it.
And also, let me say that the one name that you forgot was Norm Lewis. Norm Lewis is also
Broadway actor.
Yes.
Correct? Yes. Wonderful actor.
Yes. Broadway Norm. He was also he's our fourth blood. Yes, indeed.
I'm very excited. I'm very excited to see it. Now, this is the second movie that you've done with Spike Lee. Is that correct? The second?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And I know you're in the middle of a press junket. These are questions you've been getting a lot right now. Let me just ask, how did you and Spike Lee come to know each other? How did that relationship start?
It happened through his brother, David. And David was a photographer on the set of the first season of The Wire, yes. And when I found out that he was Spike's brother, I said, tell your brother I want to work with him.
Good
and
for
then
you.
at the opening of that first season, the premiere of that first season, I saw Spike. I introduced myself to him, and I said, "I want to work with you." And his response to me was, "That's all right. You're on my radar."
Oh my God! What better a sentence? I cannot imagine. Wow. Well, this Mr. Peters, this has been a huge honor for me. You are a treasure trove and a talent beyond compare. I remember when I put 2 and 2 together that you were Dave's brother, and I was blown away. I never envisioned I'd get a chance to meet, let alone chop it up with you about this thing that we all love, the performing arts. Thank you for blessing this series with your insights into all things art, politics, and life. I wish you and your family health, safety, and continued prosperity. And should we say together, no justice, no peace? No justice, no peace.
Amen.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Well, there you have it. My interview with Clarke Peters back in June of this year. A big thank you to Mr. Peters for his graciousness and his time. I think we covered a lot of meaningful ground. I hope you all enjoyed it. Before we move on to our second interview today, I'm going to take another opportunity to ask you all to please subscribe to this podcast wherever you're getting your podcast from today. We've got more incredible interviews with folks like Melissa Fumero, Baron Vaughn, Chantal Tui, Ryder Doyle, and Sarah Paxton coming in the next few weeks. If you like what you hear so far, please give us those 5-star ratings, leave us a nice comment, and we'll keep bringing you these great episodes. Next up is Della Saba, an Actors Gang company member and the voice of young Judy Hopps in Disney's Zootopia. It's a wonderful conversation about theater and craft. We talk about voiceover work, theater styles, actor training, and identity. It's a lovely chat. Here now is me talking with my friend, Della. Now, you and I have a few things in common.
Mm-hmm.
I thought we could talk about them. First of all, we went to the same conservatory program, Stella Adler.
Yep.
Now, did you go via NYU or did you do just the conservatory?
I just did the conservatory.
Which is even more involved.
You did NYU, right?
Beg pardon?
Were you through NYU?
Yeah.
Oh.
Now, I did 2 years there. I think you did 3, correct?
Mine was the last year that was 2.5.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Did you like it?
Yes, and I really liked it. I like that all the people that I've met. I sometimes wonder, I sometimes think I was a little bit too young to jump straight into that. I think I took a lot of what we were taught as like God's word, like very seriously, and I think I've had to undo some of the learning that I took so seriously there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Anything that's occurring to you at the moment?
I think, do you know what? I think a lot of, where I think they do it particularly in America, where they sort of comment on things about yourself as well as the character or as well as the script interpretation. They're sort of making assessments about you as a person at the same time.
Yeah.
I feel like that to me was a little unhelpful. I took it very personally. And I think in hindsight, it sort of took out a bit of the fun. And I feel like a lot of what I'm working on now is sort of not feeling contained by those rules of like who they told me I was or how I had to be.
That's very interesting, particularly because the Adler approach is supposed to be a little bit hands-off when it comes to your own personal shit.
Right? Yeah, it's supposed to be much more imagination-based. And that's honestly where I have fun with everything, is much more in the sort of visual imagination, sort of out that kind of sense of play.
Yeah.
But I think that's why in some ways I actually don't know if it was the training or it was just me being 18, new in a city, having just moved there, that I sort of some of the things I think of is just because I'm small. A lot of the things would be sort of like, you can never be cute, or you can never like speak serious, use your grounded voice, hold your body straight, these kind of things that I took as like holy grail. And now I'm do voiceover for cartoons and things like that. And I think there was a while where I was holding on as if this was like not acting or something.
Well, I
Like I
don't
was doing
understand
it
what
wrong.
you mean. Your rounded voice and your what are these things that you're referring to?
Do you know what I'm talking about or
No.
not? Okay, I feel like a lot of what we were learning was technique, right?
Yeah.
And I remember we have one teacher who I feel like everyone references, like Jimmy Tripp.
Oh yeah, sure.
And
Jimmy, yeah.
for a while, because my voice, the way I spoke, I would kind of talk like, "Oh, hey, Jimmy," like kind of like up here. And I remember one time him sort of tearing my voice apart. And for a while, he wouldn't let me talk unless I spoke on a grounded voice. But when you're 18 and really wanting to fit in, I was like, oh my God, my voice must be awful if he never wants to hear me talk.
Yeah.
And then I moved to LA, and then voiceover was the only thing I could book. So
Oh my God.
it's two different things.
Oh, you have
But I
such a
think
great vocal instrument. We'll talk about it. But yeah, Jimmy had a way of, I do remember at one point Jimmy saying, let's be clear that he is an absolutely extraordinary teacher.
He's amazing. That's why I think everyone talks about him so much.
Yeah.
And it was theatrics, which I think in hindsight, I see the funny side of it. But when you're 18, you don't see, I didn't see that he wasn't just trying to like tear me apart. And that was my acting career over before I'd already started.
I've talked with other actors on here about when you're in school, there is this kind of a breaking down process that happens. Mm-hmm. It tends to exist with almost every acting studio. I think with Jimmy, I think what was interesting is occasionally, like I remember him saying to us, so the Adler approach is one of the aspects of it is this idea of using dramatic actions, which are sort of verbs that describe what you're doing to the other person in order to get what your character wants out of a scene. They call them actions. Another way to think about them are like tactics or strategies. Hopefully most people listening to this know this, but if you don't, that's okay, and this is what it is. But I do remember what Jimmy saying to us one day, like, actions are for amateurs, which is funny because, yes, like, I guess if you're a pro, you know to be doing your actions, so I guess maybe you don't need to think about them all the time anymore, but when you are a student, it's quite important to be rigorously doing them. So I feel like Jimmy would have a comment every once in a while that would just be like, fuck this or fuck that, like, because he's awesome, he's a rock star teacher, and
totally
would make proclamations
for sure. Like, it's so funny because I think I'm only just kind of grasping the concept of actions now. I was a late learner on that.
They're so, and I think they're a thing that people get I tend to feel like, I know I do get lazy about them, and my wife also went through the Adler program, and she has reminded me, so if I'm running something with her, she'll say, you're not really doing anything. And I was talking to Melissa Fumero the other day about we had a teacher at another studio, Cap 21, who accused both of us in different ways, not accused, but pointed out correctly that we were being kind of general in our work. So this is what tends to happen is, like, you get an audition and you get a general, sometimes I think we get a general vibe from the scene, like, oh, they're upset or they're scared. And so you paint the whole scene with that one color. But of course, in real life, that's not how we are. In one moment, we're shocked and then immediately aggressive and or sad. And there are many colors, and the actions tend to help us, right, navigate so that the scene ends up being more dynamic. I think that's what Stella means when she says the talent is in your choice.
In your choice. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, okay, so so you were raised in the UK?
Yeah.
Were you born there?
Yeah, I was born in London.
Me too.
Wait, I think I did know that. I know, because I know the next thing is going on too that we have in common, but I forgot that you're born in London too.
I was born in the city of Westminster.
Oh, where was I born? I grew up in like West London.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I was raised there on and off throughout my life. I was there for high school.
Where did you go?
The American school.
Oh, I always used to see the kids from the American school. Oh no, wait, maybe I'm thinking of the French lycée because they always had American. A lot of the kids that had the American accents, but maybe it was the American school. Where was it? It was in Westminster.
It was in St. John's Wood.
Oh, my dad used to live around there.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Another thing we haven't got.
Yeah. So, yeah, it was great being able to see the theater that I saw when I was there.
Yeah.
It's nice that they have subsidized theater and you can get student tickets. I mean, I used to go after school. It was either you'd go to the pub in high school or
yeah,
or you'd go, like, I would just go by myself and see theater. And I saw, amazing people at the National Theater or wherever for what was, I think at the time was like 15 quid.
You could even, I remember a time when they even did £5 tickets to go. You could stand at the back. They make it so accessible. I don't know if I think it's the same still. I haven't lived there for a while, but yeah, it's definitely makes such a difference with the affordability of everything. It's the same when I go see my friends, we'd be more likely to go to the theater than the cinema because it's actually cheaper sometimes.
Yeah.
Which just changes, the medium and also what theater I think can be about, because it also, there's a younger audience there. So I think it can have a more of a changing voice, more of a contemporary voice, have a more immediacy maybe because people are going all the time.
Yeah, there was this letter that was signed by 300 theater artists addressing the white American theater and talking about a range of issues that deal with systemic racism in the theater in the United States, and of course racism. We've also had this. I've had this discussion with somebody on this podcast about racism in the UK. And anti-Black racism, but in the UK, this also exists. One of the things in the UK theater, but that thing about being able to go to see the theater for not what would cost you the price of an airline seat. That's a big deal.
It's a huge deal. I think about it here in LA even. Just, I want to go support all my friends' theater, but it's still, most places is about $35 to, and the thing with theater is theater when it's good is amazing and transformative. Theater when it's average is like that's a gamble on $35. But I hear you on because I'm part of a theatre company here, and we've been talking a lot about, I guess it exists in England too, but the racism within the theatre companies, our theatre company, we've had a lot of conversations about it, but it definitely is having a lot of chats about how to make change within it, because there is a structure that does definitely benefit. Even in terms of the stories that are picked, it's definitely got a white lens on it, I think.
Right. And if you're serving a primarily white audience who can afford the tickets, that becomes a major part of the problem.
Totally. And actually, our theatre company, they do a Thursday night, which is pay what you can, which it changes who the audience is, changes the theatre so entirely. And it's often plays as well are written, I don't know, to be, it's part of the performance is who's in your audience as well. And it's really, I've really been thinking about that a lot, just in terms of the age, where people are from, what race. People are gonna respond to things in different ways, and that's so important to be part of the storytelling. That medium in particular is an exchange of audience and actor at the same time.
It absolutely is. Yeah. And now so I was going to ask you about your theater company. We should talk about it. So you're an ensemble member? Is that are there different? Yeah, you're an ensemble member of the.
So the whole theater company. Yes, it's an ensemble based theater company. We do predominantly ensemble theater.
So this is the Actors Gang, which was started by Tim Robbins here in LA.
Yeah.
Some of the alumni include Helen Hunt and Kate Walsh, John Cusack, John C. Reilly, Jack Black, and Kyle Gass from Tenacious D. Now, I know and have worked with Shira Piven, who is a film director, and she also is, she's very close with a number of the people in that company, and that she's worked with them. I've taken class with her. It was a Commedia-based class. And that's sort of typically what the company does, right? Is it Commedia theater primarily, or is that just one of or is it other things like Viewpoints as well?
We do viewpointing too. It's definitely rooted. So because you start with the training through to get into the company, that is based in Commedia, and they do mask work, and they do and we do viewpointing. So that's also where the ensemble comes in, which, speaking of, like, even just storytelling through a certain lens, a white perspective, Commedia, we've even been talking about that in the company, because it is set up in this it's set up with a class and a hierarchy. But
is it? I didn't. So within Commedia, because I was about to say, it's more translatable because it's mask work. But no, you're saying there's actually a hierarchy within it.
I mean, I am no expert on it, so totally, this is through my lens. I think in terms of the exploration we do within the characters. Now, I'm not saying it has to be appointed to specifically to race, but I do think that we are sort of looking at these archetypes of, the rich man and his wife in the house, and then the servant who has to do everything they say, and then it's set up. It's in every storytelling, right? Shakespeare was inspired by this, and but it's set up in a way that I think, if you're telling stories through it can fall in, because it's archetype, right?
That's what I was going to ask.
So it can fall into archetype, and when you're looking at archetype, you only look at archetype through the broad lens that you have been exposed to archetype.
So archetype exists. This actually was even before the writing of Chekhov, was this archetype kind of character writing where you would have in a given story a king, a queen, a soldier, a fool, a servant. So, and then the dialogue was quite representational, right? It was, you would say exactly what you mean. Right? I love you as I love you. There's no subtext, right?
Totally. And with that, I think also Commedia is based on street theater as well. So I think it comes from, so you're breaking the fourth wall a lot of the time. You're looking people in the eyes, because you're trying to, I guess it came from people. I really hope I'm not butchering the history of this, but this is what I've been told.
Isn't that what's fun about a podcast, is we can just talk straight from our ass.
Guys, go and fact check everything I say. Right. But I think it is supposed to be that if you're doing street theater, you're trying to catch people's eyes. You don't want them to walk away, right? So you got to look them in the eyes and perform.
Yeah.
And to make clear, it's not that, I think, as I mentioned, saying that I think that, speaking of archetype, it can play into things that we're trying to right now, rightly so, having discussions about, trying to break. It's not that those characters are written that in a certain way. It's just, I think there is it's all adds up to everything we're exposed to, right? Or everything, it can very easily fall into patterns that probably aren't helpful.
Right, that map onto colonial sort of previous and current societies.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I hope that we come off sounding smart about that stuff, but I have no idea. I think that tracks. But it's certainly a good time for conversation. It is a very prestigious theater company. How was the that you're a part of? So could you talk a little bit about what was the audition process for that?
That audition process, you go in, let me remember. Oh, you do viewpointing, and then they work, so they sort of,
Could you tell folks a little bit about what viewpointing is? Because that's also a little bit, upper level acting stuff.
Yeah, so viewpointing, it's so funny, because I only know it through what we do, so I don't know the broad, thing, but what we tend to do is, it's movement-based theater based on, it's almost, okay, the way I see it is when birds flock, they're just flying, and suddenly they all fly in the same direction, but there's like this ephemeral energy they're receiving that makes them go change direction. We sort of work in that. So you'll start with a movement, one company member, and we'll all sort of, just with your peripheral vision, you'll start to receive what they're doing, and through that it sort of turns into this display. There are certain rules we have. We work through 4 emotions: happy, sad, afraid, or angry. So you team that with this movement, it becomes very expressive. Through that, we then add improvisation. That's an added thing from viewpointing, but we then will start to talk through, let's say I have a behavioral gesture, you can't see me, but like whatever I'm doing will then inform me of what I'm going to say. And then we've already talked about the archetypes, but I'll then, within that form, that's sort of where a story comes through.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me. I don't know if it makes sense to everybody. Let's talk, like, what's an example of a behavioral gesture, since we can see each other, but the audience can't.
Okay. So like, if I was a person who always scratched my nose, like every time I got sort of, I'm doing it, no one can see me again, but like if a behavioral gesture would be like scratching your nose, or maybe you like fidget with your hands all the time, or maybe you always scratch the side of your neck or play with your earlobe or something. I think all humans have a whole load of mannerisms, and we're sort of honing in on one to create character.
Yeah, or that it could be a potential starting place or a hook into. Yeah. I think that. That's a great explanation of that. So that was what you had to do for the audition. It was sort of jump in with a group. Was it a group audition?
With a group of people, and then you work through sort of 2 years of being like an intern kind of vibe person at the company, but you were allowed to be in the shows and stuff. And then you're in the company, and they also encourage you have to do volunteer work with it.
Okay.
It's like a volunteer system,
like
not dues paying.
Like the old apprentice system, which a lot of theaters employ.
Yeah, but with ours, actually, you can either help out like with the theater, with the maintenance, or the Actors Gang works. It has a few programs like the Prison Project, or they teach kids theater, and so you can kind of get slotted into different things depending on your skill set.
Now, I've heard about the Prison Project, and it sounds like an extraordinary project that this company does. Do you want to talk a little? Did you get an opportunity to participate in that one or not?
I've literally, I'm probably not the right person. I think it's amazing and would want to further get to be part of it more. I literally have been the person who's like cleaned the makeup that goes to the prisons, and I've only been to I've only seen one performance that was done. So I'm probably not the best to talk about it, but I do know that it's basically, they use the same stuff that we teach the same thing to everyone, if it's to kids or if it's to inmates. It's the 4 emotions, which is great because it's very expressive and it's very releasing, and the same archetypes, and you take classes through that, and I know it's been very, very successful in terms of getting people to sort of unlock themselves and have a chance to have
a cathartic experience.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so I did see that you also did an intensive. Did you do a full year at Lambda, the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art?
No, I just did the summer program there.
I did one of those. Yeah. Did you do?
Did we do the same again?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we have a lot in common. Did you do was it the Shakespeare certificate?
Yeah,
program? I did that. Yeah. I thought it was good.
It?
I mean, I don't think I still, to this day, I don't think I've done a full Shakespeare. Have you done a full Shakespeare?
I've done Midsummer Night's Dream at Stella Adler. That's it.
Yeah. I'd love to. I'm ready now to try it.
I am too. Do you know, I think I only get it now. Like the other day at Actors Gang, we had to on Zoom do Shakespeare monologues, and I was like, oh, like now I can play all the kids' roles. Like the younger women, but like it's funny because I think you learn it. I feel like I was taught it with so many rules as well, and now I'm older, it doesn't feel so important to stick to that.
Well, the pentameter, the iambic pentameter thing is tough. It's tough to, but in terms of like decoding the language and understanding what is being said, I mean, if you're familiar with the sort of the Cockney language at all, it's then I think you get a better sense of like what, you know, Shakespeare does. Like in like a Cockney expression might be like getting in a lot of, please correct me if I get this wrong, but it's like if you get in a bunch of Barney, it's Barney rubble equaling trouble. So you're getting in trouble. If you're going up the apples and pears, you're going up the stairs.
Yes.
So with Shakespeare, it's not exactly that, but the language is playful in that way. Would you agree?
Super, exactly. Super imagery, and I think though, do you know what though? Is I sometimes this might be controversial. I sometimes think though that like that, because I always read the blurb that tells me what it says. But that's just like one person's opinion, isn't it? Sometimes I'm like, I think people just really. Sometimes I think people actually know less of what it means than it actually means, but I think that's okay. Like,
okay.
Like when I read Shakespeare, I don't always know what it's saying, and then I'll look up the blurb, and it's like, this is what it's saying. But I sometimes feel like you can kind of make up what it's saying, and as long as you know what it's saying, it's like your own secret language. So it's almost like the Cockney rhyming slang, only in some ways you can, if it's playing something on your partner, it doesn't really matter what it means.
Right.
Or maybe that's what my freedom has come, and maybe it's not right. But I feel like there is something to it almost being up to anyone's interpretation.
Well, I think so. And particularly with our modern lens on acting, and particularly the influence of sort of American styles, or we say American, but it's really Russian. It's really this Stanislavski, I think, system, which we've adopted. And but the Stanislavski system was allowing for the subtext that was written into things like the Chekhov plays, where if you said to somebody, you know, I love you could mean a number of things. It could mean goodbye. It could mean, it could be just a bald-faced lie, depending on the interpretation of what you think the character means when they say. So if you do apply that to Shakespeare, I think that you're, I don't think he'd be mad. Well, I don't know. He probably would be mad. He wrote a whole speech into Hamlet about like actors don't wave your arms, don't like. So he might hate it. What I loved though was like when in that Lambda program, did you get Christine Ozanne talking about the scrolls?
Shit. What was she? Am I allowed to swear? What did she say?
Yes, you are. Yes, she explained about how you would get just as the actor, you'd only get your lines that were like toilet paper around a little, like a rolling pin.
Like in Midsummer Night's Dream. Oh no, you're talking about scrolls.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because Shakespeare didn't trust the actors, I guess, to do much work at all. Like he wrote it in such a way that one actor would come out and say his line, and another actor would come out and say his line, and it would be the setup and punchline to the joke, and that's all you know, like it was all in the writing, I guess.
Do you think it made people really good at listening because you just are like, well, where is my cue? When is it coming?
Well, if you look,
it probably helped with that.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at that Ben Affleck character from Shakespeare in Love, when he shows up and he does that, do you know this? You remember the scene where he like arrives and he's like, I can't even remember the lines, but he's just booming out lines in the little Globe Theater there. It occurred to me that like this is what the kind of actor that would have been sought after at the time, is just somebody who had a big voice, stood well, good posture, and said this shit.
Totally. I mean, that brings us back to what Jimmy was trying to tell me. Like, have a big voice, stand still.
Have a big voice and stand the fuck still. So funny. Okay, so the other thing, the other sort of bigger thing that we have in common is that we are both half Middle Eastern.
Yeah.
And we actually collaborated on a comedy show featuring Middle Eastern comedians. You were so kind to do our beautiful posters because you're a very talented illustrator. And while we're on this real quick, where can folks go to check out your drawings and buy your zine?
Oh yeah, on my website I have my zine. So that's on my website, which is della-saba.com. But I haven't been posting on Instagram as much, but it's gonna be coming. I took a little pause, but I've still been drawing.
You're incredibly talented at it.
Thank you.
Now, okay, so just back to our shared heritage. Do you find, are you, because you're half Middle Eastern and you're half, or well, I should be more specific. You're half Lebanese, is that correct?
Yeah.
And half Polish, is that right?
So my mum is, her side of the family is Polish Jewish.
Okay.
So, but my mum was born in England. So, whatever that, but yeah, so that's her side of the family, and then my dad's side of the family is Lebanese.
Yeah. Okay. And mine is, I'm half Jordanian and I'm half Irish.
Yeah. So we got, actually, it's not really that similar, but it's kind of similar.
Yeah. Well, I've done, because I'm adopted, I have looked into some of my 23andMe stuff, and when you're adopted, it's sort of like anything that is a potentially part of your, not potentially, that is part of your identity, it becomes very important to you because you don't have the thing that other people have, which is that they really know where they're from, there are certain things. So for adopted people, my sister's also adopted. She's half Persian and half Irish by coincidence.
Oh.
Not so much by coincidence. The adoption agency reached out to our parents and were like, we think we found a playmate for your son, which is weird.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So I did get back some results, and actually, so my Middle Eastern side is a full 50%. And but it's somewhat Lebanese. Like it's more Lebanese than it is, and Syrian. There's some Lebanese and some Syrian and Jordanian in that half. So close-ish. What I wanted to ask you was, so do you feel, or find rather, that you're commonly identified as Middle Eastern? Because it's a weird thing to be in our particular industry.
It's when you're talking about, because I can't even imagine what it must be to like hold on to identity when you're adopted. Like that feels like that, what you're saying makes a lot of sense. And I can say even without that, I always feel a little like awkward.
Yeah.
Just like that mixed thing is I never know how that exactly that, I mean, that's maybe, I never know how someone is viewing what they think. I'll say in America, because of my accent, people tend to just jump to English, but then the next question is usually like, where are you from? I always feel like Middle Eastern people immediately know I'm Middle Eastern. That's
interesting.
They'll always be like, oh, you're from the Middle East, and I'm like, yay, you got it. But I get a whole load of different guesses.
Hollywood has a difficult issue with Middle Eastern people. We are the least represented, I think.
Can I just say, going back to the comedy thing you were talking about, the thing that you set up,
yeah,
that
we did
amazing
a show, yeah,
evening, I was so happy when I was there. I was smiling the whole time, and I called my sister later. I was like, Nicole, there are more people like I'd never sat in a room where people were talking about just that so in between experience, and that again, it's like what so many more and more people are gonna have, which is that mixed kind of culture, or kids of immigrants, or whatever it is. It sits so awkwardly in terms of the way our world likes to assess people.
Right, completely. Well, it was nice to have community together that night. We were able to do that show twice. We were planning on doing it annually in this year, but right now it's tricky. So we'll just have to wait maybe until this health crisis is over to do it again. But anytime you show up in a public space with other folks who are Middle Eastern, it feels incredibly empowering.
It really does. Yeah, it's really cool. I have that also when I go home to see my family, and not home, to Lebanon to see my family. Just the whole time. Yeah, it's cool. It's cool.
I'm gonna go on here and ask you a little bit about your really big Sorry, that sounds weird. You have a great career in voiceover and animation.
Thanks.
You voiced young Judy Hopps in Disney's Oscar-winning film Zootopia, which of all the movies that my kids watch, that one is one of my absolute favorites.
Ah, yay! That's awesome.
And
I
every
love that
time
one
we
too.
watch it, I love hearing your voice doing the character. I love that movie. I think that's one of those movies that does a pretty good job of speaking towards social issues while at the same time being very entertaining. Do you feel that way?
I totally feel that way. I wonder, like, I'd love to hear other people's, two people podcasts. I'd love to hear more people's perspective on it. But like, no, I feel like for the time when it came out, I definitely felt like, it's the writer Phil Johnston. There's a few writers, but I know that his stuff. He also did Wreck-It Ralph. I feel like he has a great way of really addressing adults, like adult things, and putting them into kids' storytelling. And I think he does it well. I don't think he's scared to go like a little darker, a little deeper. And I like that. I think that's why actually a lot of adults respond to it.
Yeah, and the jokes that are subtle for the adults are so sharp. I really love that movie. So people talk about voiceover as being very hard to break into, but very lucrative. So how did you break into that world initially? And do you have any advice for folks who want to do it?
Okay. I broke in very randomly. I got introduced to one person who worked at Disney, and then when you're like, hey, I don't have an agent, does someone want to sign me? And the only person who actually like let me come and meet them was Jamie Roberts, who was amazing, who's the casting director at Disney. And I had this interview with her. It was one of my early ones, and they were looking for someone to do, so this is actually the advice I would give too. They were looking for someone to do scratch work, which is when you're when they're making the movie, they have an actor come and stand in for the main roles. So I've actually done scratch work. I did scratch work for Moana. That's where I started. Then they put me on to Zootopia. So I did Moana. I worked on for a long time. And then I also did a session of scratch work. Well, like I think a couple sessions for Sarah Silverman's character in Wreck-It Ralph 2, which later I did a different voice. But like, so that's kind of that is, if people can find ways to do scratch work. I was working with Ron and John, the directors who did like Aladdin and Little Mermaid, and they also obviously did Moana, and every week I was coming in and would do long sessions, and I would in essence have like free training into voiceover through them because I was being directed by them.
So you're laying down the voiceover tracks, and then eventually they'll bring in Sarah Silverman to do her lines. Interesting. So I'd imagine during this quarantine that there might be quite a bit of work for voiceover artists working in commercials and animation. So have you stayed fairly busy throughout this pandemic?
It feels like it's picking up now. I have been like, I feel things have felt a little bit normalized in terms of just, I still have my own day-to-day auditions. I still was already recording from home. But it does feel, I'm starting to feel it picking up in the last like 2 weeks. And I've done a few sessions from home, and I just went in last week for my first actual in real life studio session. So that was cool. Yeah, but it's cool to be able to do it, in this little space.
I mean, to be able to work from home like that, yes, very cool.
Yeah.
Well, Della, thanks so much for coming on and chatting with me today. You're an incredibly talented actor, artist, and person. You're also a great friend.
Thanks.
It's always fun catching up with you. To everyone out there, if you listened all the way to the end of this second episode, I want to say thanks for listening. Give us a subscribe and those sweet 5-star ratings, a nice comment, and we'll return the favor by bringing you even more quality content in the future. Stay tuned because we've got 8 more incredible episodes, including interviews with Melissa Fumero, Baron Vaughn, Chantal Tui, Ryder Doyle, Sarah Paxton, Brandon Scott, Christine Woods, Tembi Locke, and Vinny Chibber, to name more than a few. Our sound engineer is Christopher Frontiero, and our series composer is Cormac Bluestone. Our series graphics editor is Dan Olszewski. Take care of yourself, folks. Hang in there. You're doing great. See you next time.